Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is the third in our series of four board governance building blocks webinars, and tonight's topic is strategic planning made easy. My name's Katie Morehouse, and I work with the MacKillop Farm Management Group, assisting with comms and events. And Sally Close, MacKillop's CEO, is also online tonight. So this workshop's designed for people who want to transform their board and committee meetings from long and dull to dynamic and productive. Some of you may have attended either the last two or one of the workshops held in August and October, and for some people it might be your first. They're all designed as individual modules and can be attended as standalone events or a series. We'll let you know some more details on the next webinar coming up, as well as an exciting full-day in-person governance workshop that we're holding in early May in Naracoorte. This series of four workshops have been designed to strengthen individual leadership capacity and capability to support community and drought resilience. By gaining a better understanding of governance, decision-making is improved, increasing community resilience in times of drought. This project is supported by FRRR through funding from the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund. This evening's presentation will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel and on our website within the week. As a courtesy to our presenter tonight and fellow attendees, we do ask that where possible your cameras remain on and microphone off. We'll have the chat facility available to take questions, and I can alert Natasha when these appear. Feel free to jump in anytime and use the chat function for your questions. So I'd now like to welcome Natasha Rees, our presenter for this evening. Thanks, Natasha.
Thanks, Katie. Now I should share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can all see that. I have to move this so that I can see you all. Okay. Can everyone see the screen, the presentation? Yes? Great. All right. So as Katie said, this topic is about strategic planning made easy. And Katie has also already acknowledged the funding that has made this possible. I'd like to kick us off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we're all joining in from. For me, that is the Kaurna people. I'm on Kaurna country. I'm actually in McLaren Vale. So like you, can have patchy internet. So hopefully, as I am presenting and speaking, that the internet plays nice for me, and we don't drop out. But totally understand if you're finding that your internet bandwidth doesn't support kind of showing your video and seeing the presentation at the same time. But I do like to see your faces. Katie will help me and chime in if someone has their hand up or has a question in the chat, but feel free to interrupt as we go along. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am on several boards. I'm chair of Access to Place, which is the specialist disability housing provider for South Australia. And I'm also on a number of health boards, including the medical board, the South Australian board of the Medical Board of Australia. I have previously worked in government, both in Commonwealth and state government. But I certainly understand what it means to run a small not-for-profit or a volunteer-run organisation, having done my stint in respective managing committees of sporting clubs around where we live. I know that sometimes it can be quite difficult running a volunteer organisation. So as I said, I live in McLaren Vale with my husband and son, and we have an elderly spoodle who is starting to go deaf and blind, but still loves his walks and food, like any good spoodle. So that's just a little bit about me. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is a bit of an overview of what is strategy and why does it matter. I'm going to take you through a fairly simple framework, just a simple 3-step approach to help you on your way. We're going to talk a little bit about putting it into action and some common pitfalls that hopefully you'll avoid. And then lastly, we'll just finish off with some questions that you might have, but feel free to pipe in with questions as we go. But we'll hopefully have time at the end for questions, and then I'll give you some resources, some further reading or sources of reading that you can find on the internet if you want to. So to be interactive today, I'm using an app called Slido. And if you are able to access the internet, you can either go to your favorite internet provider and type in slido.com and enter the event code, which is 1136264. Or if you've got a phone handy, I'll give you a QR code and you can just take a photo of that, and that will automatically take you to the event app location. So if you use that QR code with your phone, hopefully that will work for you. And I've just realized it seems to have a slightly different number to what the one I just mentioned before. So I think you use this one, 1751879. Hopefully that's the right one. I have been using this for each of these workshops. So fingers crossed you actually get the right questions. All right. Has everyone been able to do that okay? We will go to the first question, which is, how do you feel about strategic planning? And because I'm a bit of a dog lover, I've got 6 different dogs that you can choose from about how you feel about strategic planning from 1 to 6. Don't overthink it. Pick one. It's just a little bit of fun, really. All right, so at the moment we have number 3, a bit of a winner, but we've got a few other people who are feeling like number 1, 5, and 6. Has everyone voted? Looks like we've got the winner as number 3. Okay, so a little bit quizzical maybe. That's a good thing. All right, let's move on to what is strategy and why does it matter. And hopefully this isn't you, but if you can't see this cartoon, it says it's a group of people sitting around a board table saying, what if we don't change at all and something magical just happens? Usually it doesn't. And so strategic planning is all about preparing for the future and not leaving it to chance, not leaving it to hoping that something magical will just happen. So a few definitions about strategy that I've just kind of taken from a few publications. There's one that talks about a deliberative, disciplined effort to produce fundamental decisions and actions that shape and guide what an organisation is and does. Sounds a bit wordy. An activity to set priorities, focus energy and resources, blah, blah, blah. Also very wordy. Someone else suggests that it's a general plan of action for achieving one's goals and objectives. Well, that sounds a little bit clearer and simpler. Basically, the upshot is, from my perspective, that strategy is simply about making decisions on what to do and what not to do in a structured way, rather than hoping and praying that something magical is going to happen. You actually think in a structured way around what you want to do and how you want to do it. I think what strategy is it's not a long, complex document that gathers dust. It's not a one-off exercise that you do once every 5 years. It's also not something that is only for your big, large corporations or big organisations, and it's not something that should take months to complete. I'm hoping today that I'll show you a very simple way that you can start embedding strategy in your organisations without having to make everyone feel like they really don't want to do it. So why is it important? Maybe I'd like to see if anyone has any thoughts about why they think strategy is important. Is anyone prepared to speak up and give me your thoughts about why it's important from a sort of a board or a governance perspective?
I'll jump in then.
Thanks,
Well,
Katie.
I guess to make sure people are all on the same page as to what their goals are.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just to make sure you've actually got an action plan and you can actually measure your success against that action plan.
Yeah. Anyone else want to pipe in? Well, this is why I think it's important. It provides direction. It enables you to stay focused on what's important and avoid getting sidetracked. And using up what I think, for a lot of not-for-profits and volunteer organisations is using up your limited resources. So it enables you to give you and your team some guidance around what's important and what you should be focusing on. It helps guide your decision-making process, helps you make difficult decisions, like sometimes, let me give you an example. As I mentioned, I'm chair of a disability housing provider, and we quite often have both disability providers and people with disability and their families come to us and say, will you build us a house? So as a board, we would often have a conversation on these very kind of individual basis around, should we build a house for this person? So rather than continuing to constantly on a case-by-case basis decide as an organisation or as a board whether we wanted to build a house for an individual, we created a framework and worked within our strategic plan to focus on those people who were of most importance to us as an organisation. So it enabled us to be able to make a decision about whether an individual was the right fit for us, because we had some guiding framework around that. And that also enabled us to communicate that to people so that they knew whether they would potentially be eligible for a house with access to place. So that's just an example of how strategy can guide your decision-making processes. It also helps you adapt to change. Katie said earlier that, these workshops are being funded through the drought resilience funding. And so having a strategic plan enables you to adapt to change and respond to external forces or emerging needs that your organisation needs to cater for to enable you to remain strong and resilient. And then lastly, it really creates a shared vision so that everyone is on the same page about where you're heading and why. And then it, energizes the team to focus on what's most important, what really matters. So they're my thoughts about why strategic planning is important. All right, so let's move on to the simple 3-step framework. So it really is looking at where you are now as an organisation, thinking about things like why do you exist, what are your strengths and what are your challenges. Then the second step is where do you want to go into the future? What is your long-term vision and what's your purpose as an organisation? And then the third step is how will you get there? How will you succeed? What would you do first? So I'm just having a look. There's quite a lot of comments in the chat. Is there anything there, Katie, that we need to answer? Any questions?
No, it's just operational. Everybody's happy.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll go into each of these 3 steps in a little bit more detail. So step 1, where are we now? So this is where you, as a team, can think about your organisation. Why does it exist? What are your strengths? What are your challenges? And I don't know if anyone is familiar with the SWOT brainstorming tool. That is a simple tool where you can identify your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities as an organisation, and potential threats as well. You can use whatever tool you like. This is a common one. Is this something that people are familiar with or not? Yes, I see lots of head nodding, so that's really good. So I won't labour the point there. So what I'd like you to do now is to open up the Slido again and name one challenge for your organisation that you would, you don't need to say what your organisation is, although I'm sure Katie knows everyone on the call, but I don't know you. But feel free to just name what one challenge that is you think something that your organisation is grappling with at the moment. Okay, so we've got one there around increasing membership and active members, funding, perennial issue for organisations, management, funding again, strong leadership and the continuity of that leadership, clarity of direction, government. So that's a pretty broad topic. So that could include, I guess, funding as well as government policy. We've got different priorities. Great. Thank you all for identifying, one challenge. And I think this is where strategic planning can possibly help with you thinking about those challenges and how you might solve them. So step 2 is thinking about where do you want to go. It's quite useful to think about this. Like, a lot of people might have like a 3-year strategic plan or a 5-year strategic plan. But I think what's really useful is thinking about this in a really long-term way. What's your really long-term vision? What's your vision for the organisation in 20 or 30 years? Because that's the real kind of visionary stuff that people can quite often get engaged by. So thinking about that long-term vision, why do you exist? What is your purpose? And ultimately, in a perfect world, what would you ultimately want to achieve? So another exercise for you, why don't you imagine that it's 2050? Think about your organisation. So we're talking about 25 years' time. What's your organisation doing? What are people saying about your organisation? Maybe are you proud that you may have achieved? What would your team be telling friends and family about? So let us know in the Slido poll. Okay, so we've got a pessimistic one. We also have a positive one, powerful and respected. Another great positive one, that you've tripled in size. Another one, that you're encompassing other organisations within your community. That's great. So they're all like really positive, apart from the Landcare one, really positive, future-focused visions for your organisation, that you're better known and valued in the community, you're a financially sustainable organisation, you're a robust group with a mix of long-standing and new members with a clear blueprint, a proven track record, and that you've expanded following a structured business plan. So they're all really good, positive visions that you can potentially incorporate into a strategic plan. So some people
Excuse me, Natasha,
yep,
just
Katie?
on that. We've had a query, is 25 years too far? I mean, this was just a bit of a trajectory sort of question, was it? But is 25 years too far for a strategic plan? Is that what you were asking, Jason?
Yeah. Obviously, most strategic plans are obviously sort of 3 or 5 years. I think it's great lensing 25 years from now, but dangerous all the same. There could be lots of stuff that would happen between now and then.
Absolutely. I think the best strategic plans are dynamic and evolving. And so while a lot of people do 3 or 5 year strategic plans, I don't think it hurts to even just have a 1-year strategic plan and just kind of review it, because things can change quickly. The 25 years is more about the vision. Where do you want to go long term? And so that helps you think about the vision in a quite a kind of open way, rather than kind of restricting yourself to just sort of what's the vision in 3 or 5 years' time. I think if people think kind of 25 years, then that enables them to think more broadly about what the vision could be. So a lot of strategic plans have a vision and a purpose. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about those two things. So we've talked by way of example about what a vision could look like by doing the 2050 imagining. Essentially, a vision is the world that you want to see, your organisation, what's its purpose, and what do you want to see the world look like. The purpose sometimes is called mission. They're really interchangeable, mission and purpose. But they're generally a little bit more specific around why you exist and the people that you serve. You know, you could be a member-based organisation, or you could be a community-based organisation. So the purpose, the mission tends to focus more on that component, whereas the vision is more about the broader kind of where you fit in the world. Sometimes it's helpful to think about the vision as being a really big, scary goal that you might not necessarily achieve. It can be quite aspirational, and that's okay. It's okay to have an aspirational vision, because if you don't kind of set that, you know, flag on the moon, if you don't think about JFK saying, you know, by the end of the decade, in 1963, by the end of the decade, we're going to be on the moon. You know, I'm pretty sure people in 1963 probably thought he was absolutely crazy to think that people would be on the moon. And yep, they achieved it in 1969. So sometimes you have to set that really big, scary goal in order to move forward and achieve it. So don't be afraid to kind of have a vision that might feel a little bit scary. I'd also like to talk a little bit about kind of what your ultimate kind of end game is. Like, in a perfect world, if you had all the resources in the world, what is it that you ultimately want to achieve? Because I think it can differ depending on different organisations. So I've got some examples here. So the first one is having a sustainable organisation, or delivering a sustainable service. And so the result that you're trying to achieve there is a strong organisation with ongoing funding that fills a service gap. And so your strategy model might be about having a sustained delivery of a core service that becomes more efficient over time. And I've just given an example from kind of down, well, it's probably more Mount Gambier way, but there's an aged care facility called Bowen-Dick Lodge down there. So, you know, that may well be their end game, is just having a sustainable service. I don't know if they do or not. That's just my kind of example. Then the second end game could be mission achievement. So this is where you actually are focusing on solving a problem. Maybe, you know, Landcare doesn't exist because you've actually, you know, solved everything and you don't need it to exist anymore. And so your strategy model is more around having kind of clearly targeted research and intervention. So the example I've given is the Cancer Council. You know, their vision is to eliminate all cancer. So, you know, they actually want to do themselves out of business. You know, I'm pretty sure it'll probably take them longer than 2050 to do that. But, you know, they're looking at wanting to, you know, achieve the result that they're looking for. The third possible end game could be government adoption, maybe integration with public sector programs. Government picks up what you're doing and funds it, or that you are delivering services on behalf of government and maintaining research and advocacy efforts. So an example I've given there is the McGrath Foundation, the Breast Care breast cancer care. They've, I'm a bit of a cricket tragic, and so they announced at the Sydney Pink Test that they were now going to focus on all cancers, not just breast cancer, and they had received government funding to do that. So clearly they are about ensuring that government actually adopts kind of their model, and it looks like they've been very successful with that. Another end game can be replication, and that's where you deliver a model that other organisations take up, they adopt and deliver that. And so your focus might be more on a centre of excellence with programs delivered in multiple locations. So an example I've given there is Headspace, which is a mental health provider for young people, and that is all over Australia now. So that is sort of like a franchised version of a not-for-profit organisation. So I would say that their end game is about replication. And then lastly, your end game could be open source, and that is having research available to anyone, and providing a knowledge and advocacy hub where you share that knowledge and support others. And an example which is kind of relevant to the funding that we've got for this workshop is the Australian Disaster Resilience Knowledge Hub. So they're in the game of providing research and knowledge and sharing that broadly. So that just is, I give these examples to help you think about what's your ultimate end game, what's your ultimate vision, and how that can influence what your strategy is. Because I think it's helpful to kind of narrow it down a little bit. Sometimes it's people can feel overwhelmed with kind of it is just so big. There's just so many things that we could be focused on to achieve our vision. So this helps you narrow that down a little bit. Does anyone have any comments or questions at this point? No? Okay, I'll move on then. So if you're finding, developing a vision difficult, I'm going to give you a framework that you can use. You don't have to use this, just if you're finding it a little bit difficult to craft a vision. So there are generally two elements to a vision. The first is a very clear picture of the future. And as I said, it's a major long-term result, that big, scary, brave goal that you're trying to achieve. And then often people stop there, but I think it's helpful to add a second component, which is about your core ideology, which is kind of what you stand for. So I'm going to be giving you some examples. But a helpful kind of way to phrase it is the name of your organisation, will, and whatever your long-term goal is, because we believe in, and then you describe your ideology. So it's a very simple kind of one-sentence vision statement. And I should say at this point that you will be getting a copy of the presentation slides. So you will have access to this and you can refer back to it later. So here are some examples. This one is an organisation that focused on educational outcomes for children in rural areas. And this is an overseas organisation, not an Australian one. But their aim was to eliminate the disparity in educational outcomes between rural and urban children, because we believe all children can lift themselves out of poverty through the power of education. So I've highlighted in green the big long-term goal, which is eliminate the disparity in educational outcomes, and then the ideology, which is that children can lift themselves out of poverty through the power of education. A shorter, simpler one, and this is an Australian example where it was an organisation focused on sort of environmentally sustainable practices. So their vision was changing young people's lives through work that is eco-friendly and environmentally sustainable. So they were focused on young people who were unemployed and having an environmentally sustainable employment opportunity for them. And then lastly, this one was, again, an Australian organisation that focused on supporting women, particularly escaping domestic violence. And so their vision was women in our community are strong, successful and driving change because we have the right to protection against violence and discrimination. So you can just see that, you know, the vision is kind of working in those two things. And I think that that is a really powerful vision statement. Often organisations have a vision statement that just kind of is only halfway. You know, it doesn't include the kind of ideology. And I think having the ideology aspect of it really makes it much more powerful. Okay, so then the next element is your purpose or your mission statement. And again, I've given you a framework that you can use if you want to. So the purpose is about having a clear, specific and compelling picture of why you exist and the expected benefit to clients or stakeholders. I think this is really important to get right, particularly if you're looking for funding from government, because they're always wanting to know what it is that they're funding and why is it compelling? Why is it compelling enough for them to fund it? So the purpose framework explains why you do what you do, but not how you do it. So I'll give you a framework. Your organisation provides whatever the service is, a description of your service. For the people that you serve, who seek, and then you define the benefit that you are delivering, because we, and then you describe how you're different, what your point of difference is. So again, I'll show you some examples to see how this, oh, no, I haven't got examples there, sorry. But because it is quite, can be quite lengthy and specific, but I think it really is about having that compelling picture about what it is you do and why you do it. So the third step is really about the fundamentals of the strategic plan. So often, you know, the strategic plan will have the vision and then the purpose, then it might have some values, and then it might have some strategic goals. So what we're talking about here is those strategic goals around how you're going to get there. What does success look like, and how are you going to make sure that you do succeed? What are the resources that you need to enable that success? And what actions do you need to take along the way to reach that goal? And thinking about what do you want to do first in order to be simple, you know, maybe focus on what's the first thing you do. And not so much on those later steps. So a plan on a page is like a single page of what your strategic plan is all about. You don't need to have, you know, a 50-page document or even a 5-page document if you don't want to. you can put it all on a single page. So what does that look like? First up, you have your vision, what your long-term destination is. Then you have your purpose, why you exist and the people that you serve. Sometimes people have values in there, what you believe in and how the people in your organisation behave. And what does that look like? Then the fourth element is what are your strategic priorities? And it's useful to think about this from the perspective of your customers or your clients or your stakeholders, whatever's relevant to your organisation. Maybe from a financial perspective, what processes, what kind of internal processes you might need to focus on to achieve your goals, and then your people. Often people might have 3 or 5 strategic priorities. I don't recommend having kind of more than 5, but I think it's helpful to think about it from those multiple perspectives. Then the next step is what are your outcomes? How will you know you've succeeded? And so that might be some goals or some targets, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. And then the last element is your actions. What are you going to do to get there? So that's a very simple framework that you can structure your strategic plan around, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail. But before we do, I'd like to give you some examples. So this one is the Australian Airports Association, and this is their strategic plan up until this year. So their vision on the left is a thriving, sustainable aviation sector for their members. So they've identified the who and the what in that. Then their mission or their purpose is to advance the interest of their members to act as a national voice on airport-related issues. And then they've got 3 strategic pillars: policy and advocacy, so they're an advocacy organisation, having engaged members, and then their kind of internal, so they've kind of put into one pillar the HR, the people, and the finances under the 3rd strategic pillar. They've got some outcomes that they've identified there. They're pretty high level. I'm not sure that they're overly well explained, so hopefully they understand them. And then they've identified what are the enablers that enable them to achieve their goal. So they've got strong relationships, stakeholder relations, a strong membership base. So I might just pause at this point. Does anyone have any questions about, the strategy on the plan on a page, or the vision or mission purpose framework that I've talked about? Nope. You're all happy for me to keep moving on? Okay,
sorry, I was just going to comment. I was just thinking about some other sort of strategic plans, and do they necessarily always have to have actions? Because you can have a strategic plan that is a call to action for other groups in industry. So I'm thinking like the blueprint. Basically, we was having a look at that, and we don't have actions on there. But basically, the actions are what the industry carries out based on your visions and your targets, etc. So.
Yeah, quite often people have a fairly high-level strategic plan that just has the strategic pillars, the overarching goals, And then they delve into more detail with the actions in like an annual business plan, for example. So yes, the answer is yes, you don't have to have actions in your strategic plan, so long as you have a mechanism to make sure that you are actioning your strategic plan in another way. So if that's an annual business plan, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks for the question. So putting it all into action now and some common pitfalls. Oh, so we've got a little cartoon, which is a little bit blurry, so hopefully you can read this okay. So we've just got the usual, I think it's Dilbert and his boss. And his boss is saying, I want you to make your report consistent with our strategic plan, but the strategic plan is secret. So don't make your strategic plan secret. It's very important that your team, whether they're staff, paid staff, or whether they're volunteers, that they understand and are aware of the strategic plan, and that they can see how they contribute to it. And there is kind of line of sight between the work they do and what the strategic plan, the ultimate goal is. So putting it into action. So as I said, strategy is more than just the planning. We've talked a lot about how you craft a strategic plan, but really putting it into action is as important as coming up with a strategic plan. Because, you know, there's no point coming up with a strategic plan that you then don't action, because then it's not going to happen. So it's very important to translate your strategy into actions with those priorities, goals, and actions identified. So here's an example of what an action plan could look like. And I've actually got a Landcare example in this one. So we'll see if this resonates or not. This particular, and look, this is all completely made up. You know, I didn't check any Landcare groups to see if they have a goal to increase youth participation. But so this one I've made up is to increase youth participation in our Landcare group. So that's the goal, that's the strategic priority that's in the strategic plan. So this then just drills down into the action plan. Well, what needs to happen first? What's the action? Well, we want to partner with the local school to run a tree planting event. Who's going to do that? Having someone identified who's responsible is certainly helpful, because then you can make sure that it happens. So I've suggested the volunteer coordinator is responsible for making this happen. And I want it done by September 2025. And what's the measure to know that we've succeeded? Well, it's an increase in the number of young people who volunteer afterwards. So I think it's really helpful in your action plan to identify what is the action, who's responsible for making sure it happens, when is it going to happen, what's the time frame, and how will you know you've succeeded? What's your measurement of success? And another tip, don't have too many. You know, especially if you're a volunteer-run organisation, you know, you can't spread yourself too thinly. So don't have too many actions. If you need to, just focus on the first year of your strategic plan. If you've got a 3 or a 5 year strategic plan, just focus on what are the actions for the first year. Okay, so here's another example of a strategic plan. And I'd be interested in people's views about this one. I apologise that it's a bit small. So if you're on a laptop, you might have a little bit of trouble reading it. But it's got strategic pillars and it's got goals and activities. Does anyone have any thoughts about this strategic plan? Is it a good one? Is it a bad one? No one has any thoughts?
Yeah, Natasha, it's Gillian here. It's not the worst strategic plan I've ever seen, but I think some of those activities probably fall into KPI territory. It will make it really, really hard for a board to then, because then you're straying into what's operational and what's strategic. So I think it'd make it really, really hard for a board to stay in their role. But yeah, like I said, it's not the worst I've ever seen.
Thank you. Look, I agree. It's, maybe not the worst, but it's certainly not best practice. And, some of the problems with this is there are just too many goals and activities. And there's no time frame in any of this. There's no kind of clarity around who's doing what. And it's a bit of a mix of both a strategic plan and an action plan, but doesn't really have the action plan elements, and is really just too much. So yeah, I think my message is keep it simple. Think about that one with the airports that I showed you, 3 pillars, a few dot points. Again, I didn't think that was overly best practice either, but it was way better than this one, which shows just way too many activities and goals for the board to focus on. So some common pitfalls that I hope you avoid. No line of sight. A strategic plan that doesn't have any link to day-to-day operations. Yes, you need to be visionary. You need to kind of be thinking strategically. But if you're completely at odds with kind of what's happening on the ground, then the people on the ground are not going to think that the strategic plan is of any relevance to them. So you do need to kind of keep it relevant to your people, whether that's your volunteers or your paid staff. Another thing that people sometimes forget about is they forget to consider external risks, or your customers or clients or the people that you serve, your other stakeholders. And so often people just focus on their organisation and their staff, and don't always think about, what might happen outside of their control. And so that's where using the SWOT can sometimes help you remind yourself around what could be some external threats or opportunities that we need to be thinking about in our strategic plan. No accountability, no one responsible to ensure that it actually gets done. This is a common one for volunteer organisations. I think it's a little bit different if you're like a not-for-profit with, paid staff. You can kind of assign responsibility to the CEO or the management team. But if you're a volunteer-run organisation, you need to make sure that you're responsible to make sure that your actions get completed. Another pitfall is not monitoring your strategic plan once you have created one. often people, they do it, it's done, it's filed away, and then they don't look at it again for 3 years. I think you really need to be monitoring it, particularly at the board level. It doesn't have to be every meeting. A quarterly kind of check-in to see how you're progressing against your strategic plan is fine. But I think you do need to make sure that you are, keeping on top of, are we still heading in the direction? Is there something that's now happened, come out of left field, that means that we need to potentially revisit our strategic plan? And too many actions, too much to do and no one to do it is a common thing as well. So keep it short, keep it simple, keep it manageable. Oh, so here are my examples about how to avoid those common pitfalls. So in terms of the line of sight, linking it to your team work plans. So if you have kind of team work plans, linking a particular team to a particular pillar could be useful. For the inward focus, I mentioned using potentially the SWOT tool to enable you to think more broadly. Make sure that you assign clear roles to people to make sure that they're responsible. Schedule quarterly check-ins to monitor your strategic plan. And too many actions, try and keep it to one page and have no more than 3 to 5 priorities that you want to action. Okay, so at this point, I'll pause and see if there are any questions in the chat, Katie, or if anyone wants to put their hand up and ask any questions. I'll just stop sharing my screen and I'll come back in a minute to that. Any questions? Is this a helpful framework for you or not? Some nodding.
Jason said, yes, it's been good to listen in. And Natasha, I was wondering, in the resources section that you'll probably cover next, are there some templates that people can access?
Yes, yes. Okay. Well, feel free to dive in again if you do have any questions. Just pipe up. But I'll move on then to what I think are the key takeaways. So if you're on a board, what are my key tips for you? Focus on why, not how. So as a board, set the big, scary, brave goal and if you've got paid staff, let them work out how to get there. That can be hard if you're on, the local netball managing committee, because you might still have to do it yourself. But if you've got some paid staff, or even if you've got volunteers, having measurable outcomes using SMART goals. So that is goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, making sure that the outcomes that you set cover that framework. You could add a standing item on your board agenda to have a strategy conversation. It doesn't have to be every meeting, but maybe you could, do quarterly kind of conversation. Maybe if you've got 4 strategic pillars, you could do a strategic pillar each quarter, or you can just talk more generally, or you can pick a particular topic. But helpful to have it regularly on your board agenda. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things. It's perfectly fine. Less is more. So don't have too much and then find you can't achieve it. Better to have less than too much. And don't be afraid to adjust it. It doesn't have to be set in concrete. It can change. You can review it more frequently than, if you said you've got a 3-year strategic plan and you want to review it in less than 3 years, that is perfectly fine, because maybe something has significantly changed that you need to review it. So, keep it agile, respond to emerging issues, adjust your goals and actions if you need to. So a little bit of a checklist for you. Good strategy is based on experience of people in your organisation. And if you've got some data, that's always helpful. Not everyone has data in their organisation that they can draw on, but if you do, then use it to inform your strategic planning conversation. So it's useful to have informed decisions with 100% buy-in by your stakeholders, particularly your team. Consider your capability and capacity to implement. So that's kind of where I was talking about keeping it simple. Having milestones and being open to kind of changing those milestones if you need to. Have really clear language. Some strategic plans I've seen are very wordy, use a lot of kind of, words that maybe are not simple. So if you can keep it clear and simple and short, then that will make it more easily understood. Bad strategy is based on feelings or personal agendas. Maybe you might have people in your organisation who are silent objectors, or you're unable to deliver on your strategic plan. You haven't invested the resources to deliver what you are wanting to achieve. The fingers crossed mentality. Remember the cartoon I said had originally around let's hope for the best, let's hope magic happens if we don't do anything, and confusing messaging. So hopefully you won't do any of those things, but if you do, maybe just once you've kind of got a draft strategic plan, maybe just run it over this checklist and see whether you are able to tick off all the good strategy items. Okay, so I'd be interested in you telling me what might be one small action that you will take this week to implement anything that I've talked about today. Doesn't have to be big, but what's your one takeaway that you'd like to take out of today's session?
While we're doing that, Natasha, there's a question.
Yep.
When there's a rather large membership or shareholders, how much involvement should we try to get from them individually in terms of setting priorities?
Look, I think it's helpful for all stakeholders for you to get a sense of what they want. It doesn't mean that they have to have involvement in your strategic plan, but maybe you might want to survey your stakeholders, give them 3 questions. What do you see as being the future of the organisation. What are your concerns? What would you like to see change? You know, those kind of questions that just help inform you as a board to develop your strategic plan. They don't need to be heavily involved. I mean, there are organisations that, you know, hold focus groups with butcher's paper and, you know, collate it all up. You could do that if you wanted to, but I think it's enough that you maybe ask 2 or 3 key questions of all your stakeholders and use that information to inform your development as a board of your strategic plan.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, you probably worked out we're just about to start a strategic review, I suppose, of a sporting organisation with a fairly large membership base. So just on what you just said then, would surveys be appropriate? Like, we're going to have an invitation to, I guess, a facilitated meeting, but we don't feel that there's going to be heaps of members that will partake in that. So your 2 or 3 questions, could that be done through survey?
Yeah, you could do a Survey Monkey or, you know, whatever kind of IT you want to do to survey your membership. You're again probably not going to get a huge response, but at least it enables people to respond if they want to. They have that opportunity. All right, any other questions? Okay, so your small actions you're going to take. Avoid acronyms and keep it simple. Great. Thinking about your target audience, who you're writing for. You're going to discuss regarding implementation of the plan and maybe do a SWOT analysis. Reread your existing strategy documents. Keep it simple. And you're going to start the process of your strategic review, which is great. And you're going to review your existing plans against keeping it simple and revisiting your strategic plan to see if it links to the team plan. So that's great. Thank you for sharing your small actions you're going to take this week. Okay, we've done questions. Okay, so my kind of key takeaways that I'd like you to think about is quite simple. Why do you exist? Being clear about why you exist and kind of what your ultimate end game is. Thinking about your vision for the future, and don't be afraid for that to be really super scary and possibly even unachievable. That's okay. Thinking about how you will get there. What are the steps you need to take? What are the resources you need to put in place to enable the team to get there? And thinking about how you're going to measure success. How will you know you've achieved your goals? So they're my 4 simple takeaways for you to keep in the back of your mind as you're going through your strategic planning process. So some resources. The Institute of Community Directors, and when you get the PDF of this presentation, you'll be able to click on the link and it will take you straight to these places. But also if you Google Institute of Community Directors Australia, and they have tips, templates and help sheets on both strategy and strategic planning. There is a Balanced Scorecard Institute that has some articles and tools to help you learn the basics of strategic planning. Excuse me, sorry. And then, excuse me, I've lost my voice now. There are kind of 2 places that you can go to get toolkits that actually give you templates. So there's Conscious Governance, which has a strategic planning toolkit with checklists and action plans. And then there's an international organisation called Nesta, and they have a toolkit that has 30 tools and techniques to help with your strategic planning. So SWOT is just one of many. So you might find some useful tools in their toolkit that might help you, Jason, with your engaging of your stakeholders. So there might be some good examples in there that you can potentially use in a workshop or in surveying. So they're my suggested resources for you. So that's the end of the session. So Katie would like to advertise the upcoming sessions. I'll hand over to you, Katie.
Thanks very much, Natasha. Thank you very much for this evening. I'm sure we all got a little bit out of that, and plenty of resources to go to. And yes, this presentation will be emailed out along with the recording that will be made available on the website. We do have one more in this series of 4 webinars coming up in March, actually same date as February, Understanding Financial Reports. It'll be a very broad brushstroke look at financial reports. It's not from an accounting person's perspective, but just where to look for things and how to get that information.
That's right. I'll be delivering that one, and I'm not an accountant, so it will definitely be coming from the perspective of what does a board member need to know? What are the basics a board member needs to know about understanding the financial reports?
And then in early May, I just wanted to flag to people, we are going to have some pretty exciting workshops coming up, a full-day governance masterclass, which will really cover more in-depth concepts of what we've covered over the 4 webinars. It will be free, and I highly recommend it. So watch out for those. And then there'll be 2 half-day workshops following that. So if you're in a place of wanting to just get a bit more confidence about securing a position on a board or learning what practices of a high-performing boards do, these will be really valuable workshops. So you'll hear more of that. There will be limited numbers, so it will be a matter of getting your spot early on. And then Natasha, does the next slide, we will be requiring some feedback from today's webinar.
Yes, so if you want to register for any of those events, you can just go to mackillockgroup.com.au. And then this is the QR code for the survey, if you can please complete that. Or you can, there is also a website address if you can't access the QR code.
But yeah, if we could take perhaps a minute now to do this so we don't forget, if everyone's got a phone, or if you don't, I know some people don't have access to this, it will be in the presentation, and I will be sending this link out as well with the presentation. But we do require you to provide feedback for these webinars, to thank our funding group, FRRR, through funding from the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund. So yeah, that would be appreciated. Thank you everyone for attending. Is there anything else, Natasha?
Yeah, well, just last chance for any questions or comments from anyone.
No. Okay. Thanks again, everybody.
All right, I will stop sharing. Okay. All right, well, hopefully that was helpful for you, and good luck with your strategic planning.
Thanks, and look forward to seeing some of you at the next one in March. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
See ya.